You are your Kluger, Palmer Hafford. What's up, y'all? Hello, hello. How's everybody doing? Welcome. We're all going to get ourselves settled, situated. Welcome to the Black Sound Arts Roundtable. Artists. Black Sound Artists Roundtable. My name is Mikaal Sulaiman. I'm one of the hosts of this symposium, along with Jane Cox, Brandon Jacob Jenkins, and Mimi Leon. I'm met with some really brilliant artists with me tonight, or today. But the first thing I want to do is actually acknowledge a colleague of mine who I didn't know well, but I knew of, who recently passed away. And I just want to have a moment of silence acknowledging the life and the brilliance of Lukman Brown. So I just want to take a moment to just to think on Lukman and sending him energy. Okay, thank you for sharing that silence with me. When we were coming in, we were experiencing the work of JOJO ABOT. And JOJO ABOT, I'd like for you to speak about that after we do introductions, and for you to tell us a little bit about what that project was. Is that all right? Okay, beautiful. So to my right, can you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do in the world. I think it's already on, yeah.
Justin Ellington, sound designer, composer, musician. Yep, in theater, radio, and wherever stories need to be told.
It should be on.
Hello. Hi, I'm Mendi Obadike. I work with Keith Obadike. And we are sound artists, musicians, artists, writers.
Yes, Mendi said it.
Hello, everyone. My name is JOJO ABOT. I am an interdisciplinary artist, exploring anything from film to fashion to music, installation work, immersive tech, lighting, costume, the whole shebang.
Woo! Hi, everybody. My name is Holland Andrews. I'm a vocalist, a composer, a sound artist. Sometimes I describe myself as a voice demon, only to get a rise out of people. And working in all avenues that sound can be made. And I'm really, really grateful and excited to be here.
Thank you all. JOJO ABOT, I bring it back to you. Tell us a little bit about what we were experiencing as everyone was coming in.
Yes, that was probably some clip from my recent opera piece that was premiered, and now we're excited to see where she goes next, called A God of Her Own Making. It was a really exciting project, particularly because it allowed me to push my sound design work that much further into spatial sound design. So working with Meyer Sound Lab to really have the sound be a moving experience across 109 speakers and getting really intimate with this technology. And that relationship being ongoing. I collaborated with my dear friend Esperanza Spalding, who is in town playing shows. And the project was really designed to provoke that state of deep connection to the divine, whatever God you choose to create, to tap into, to amplify, to give power to awaken. And we had lighting design specifically for that show, visuals, costume, choreography, and it was really a passionate project that I believe was as medicinal as it was entertaining. And so it's exciting to see where that can exist harmoniously.
Medicinal as entertaining. That is amazing. I love that. It sounds like that piece in particular was really at the intersection of what I think is really interesting about us as panelists. I myself am a sound designer as well, working primarily in theater, but as Justin said, in many other modes of storytelling. And I think it's interesting that your piece in particular was really trying to incorporate opera, theater, installation art, concerts, different ways and modes of experiencing sound art. But I'm curious if all of you can kind of speak to how you delineate or differentiate the difference between theater sound design or live performance sound design and sound design in fine art, and how that world really is the difference between some of us. And there's some real clear lines and reasons why we're very different, but I'm curious if you could each speak to them. And I want to start with you, Keith, if you can speak a little bit about, because of your background in regards to theater and fine art.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this earlier in that, at one point in my career I was working as a sound designer, and now we primarily work as sound artists. And it's really about where the work exists, right? It's really, am I working in a theater? And also typically when I think about sound design, usually that suggests that something else is central to the project, like the text. And with many of our projects, the sound is central, and we are often working in an art space, meaning a museum, a gallery. And while we might be telling a story, the bulk of the work is carried through sound or the idea of sound. I mean, sometimes there's not sound there. Sometimes we're implying something about sound, but you're looking at images primarily. Yeah, is that true?
I think that's absolutely true. And Keith mentioned that sometimes there is text in our work, and but the point for both of us is really texture and maybe something else. Even if there's sound and text, it might be something you could do as theater, but the point is something else.
I mean, I should also add that when we're talking about theater, we're talking about, I guess, what people think of as conventional Western theater, American theater, and that's part of why we kind of separate ourselves from that world, but just because of how our ideas operate. I mean, with many of our projects, there's no, we don't often operate with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Like there's a kind of circular thing that happens in a lot of our work. And that is not usually what people think of in America when you say theater. Now, some places that is theater, and that's okay for us. But here, if you called ourselves theater, I think it'd be confusing to a lot of people. Right. Yeah.
Like if they came to see one of your pieces and you called it a play, they'd be like, but where's the curtains and all the other things?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
The actors.
Yeah.
How about anybody else? Does anyone else have a relationship between the difference between fine art sound design and theatrical sound design?
Well, could you define fine art?
Yeah, I can try. I probably won't do a great job of it, especially having all these other brilliant minds on stage. So I'll start with a bad definition, and please, anybody correct me who has a better one. But that fine art, I think, exists in a space that is like the most fundamental version is, I think, and we spoke about this yesterday, where there's some type of either commission or support by a museum or fine art institution like a museum or gallery or something that is asking for someone to create a piece of art for it, or someone who has the intention of putting that creative sonic piece in one of those spaces versus inside of a theater or an immersive theater space, which we kind of consider as like a Sleep No More as an immersive theater space, or a theater place like, Broadway or something. That's kind of where I'm delineating it. But please, anybody else can add on to it.
Well, I mean, I think maybe I've done some fine art before.
Okay, yeah.
With that different.
I had no idea. Yeah, I mean, I think and so my fine art piece was at the National Human and Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta. And so the thing that was most different between that work and the work in the theater is, like you say, beginning, middle, and end. Mm-hmm. That had to be created really circular So anybody that walks in is attached to the story immediately. You know, if you walk into intermission in a play, it's like, what's going on? You know what I mean? So just the narrative is a lot more of a, in that piece at least, was more about driving and pushing emotion, right? And just the experience of it all, attached to these images or these videos that we would see. Funny, it was directed by George C. Wolfe, who is a theater person, so narrative was a very strong kind of thread, but not so much like you need to leave with understanding this story. I think you need to leave understanding yourself a little bit more. And I think we do that in theater as well, but it's attached to a story. Like, can you see yourself on stage? You know, yeah. I'll say more later.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think it's also the level of centering of the sound art. Usually in the fine art space, because people are still trying to figure out how to sell sound art, it's not usually the center and the focus. It's usually going along with something to accompany something. And honestly, most galleries aren't necessarily investing in high quality sound gear for sound installations. It'd be a luxury when they do. Or if they do. And also, I think the circular nature of sound in the gallery space and the fine art space is because people are coming in and out, and it's like long hours. Whereas in a theater or an opera, you're sitting for an experience, it's concentrated, and then you get up and you leave. So we're not necessarily always looking at that circular. You know, you can have a 24-hour play that keeps repeating itself if you have that luxury. But I think it really comes down to, you know, in an opera, sound is very important, it's centered, you know what I mean? In theater, sound may be supporting the movement and the visuals, you know, and in the fine art space, sound may just be that soundtrack that's like really badly being projected into the room. But yeah. That's not to deter anyone, by the way. Do it all.
In my limited experience with doing sound for fine art, it was in a live context, particularly a durational performance. And this isn't, working in the fine art space isn't something that I can really speak much on, so I'm just going to talk about my very, very small experience with it. But I just want to acknowledge that I really love the circuitous nature of how folks are describing the difference between how sound art lives in the fine art world versus like theater or opera, or in the background in a movie. But in the live performance that I was doing, and it was also with a couple other artists, one of them who is speaking at a panel right now, Justin Hicks. We got to perform at the Met Museum during the pandemic, and it was a live streamed performance. And the only people that got to see it were the people that were the staff. And we were interacting with with this piece by Hemingway, and being these sort of you know, what was, I'll say this, one of the most interesting things in doing that was finding the role of your body in that space and what your voice is, what is it saying? What story is it telling? Is there a narrative? Is there no narrative? Are you going to make one up to kind of give yourself the energy to get it through the 4-hour durational performance, you know? And another vocalist who got to do this, there were 3 different iterations of this piece, was Alicia Hall Moran, who I'm very grateful to say is a friend of mine. I hope she would say the same. She had this really exciting observation where she was asking Hemingway, the artist whose piece this was, he was doing it in collaboration with Bill T. Jones, who curated all the vocalists that would be singing while there was a performer, mover, moving these golden grains of sand on top of a black top, with, and they had bells on their ankles. And Alicia had this really interesting question, and she said, so if anybody knows Alicia, this question will not surprise you that she asked this. She said, so say there's a tree and there's a leaf on the tree. Are we the sun coming through the leaf? Or are we the tree and they are the leaf? So these are the kinds of questions that get to arise, I guess, in these fine art spaces because of the circuitous kind of unspecifically defined nature for how we can express ourselves in the fine art space. Hope that made sense.
I'll just add one other small thing to this sort of sound art, sound design question. I guess we haven't talked about these really basic ideas of what we might think art is and what we might think design is. And I think often if you're functioning on a team as a designer, the idea is to solve problems, right? And often if you're working as an artist, sometimes you're introducing problems or introducing questions. A designer can introduce questions too, but ultimately you're solving things. You're solving things, and the artist is almost playing an opposite role.
I feel like that is a much more centralized, more brilliant version of the difference, and I appreciate that. I welcome that, and I'll use it. I might not cite you. I'll try to pretend it's mine. But speaking of provocations and provoking the world, I was telling you all backstage as well that I think a lot about propaganda. And I spoke about this a little bit yesterday in our conversation, and how it has such a kind of evil or subversive kind of connotation. But I think it's just about essentially what ideals do you want to propagate through the world? What things do you want to introduce to the world? And, the stories that you want to tell. And Holland, you said that you're a vocal demon. Is that what you said?
Yes.
And it's kind of makes me, yes. And it kind of makes me think about what Keith is saying around asking questions or, provoking the world. Your work is beautiful. It has so many layers to it, but it also has so much complexity to it. Can you speak about A, where did vocal demon come from? How did that come out of you, A? And B, what are you propagating through the world through your art?
I knew the vocal demon thing would come back around. Thanks for that question. I think the thing that from my center that I'm trying to provoke is just a profound emotional experience. And a part of that requires dissonance. It's really difficult to grow and to develop wisdom when we're in a field of poppies, So something that I invoke, I think, with this like vocal demon aspect of myself. Angel is in there too, but also is the demon. But that friction is required to create that spark. And this is how I try to articulate that in music. That discomfort feels very important to me for the release that comes, and I model that just after my own emotional experiences in my life. And I know I'm not unique in the ways in which I can suffer, and I'm not unique in the ways in which I feel free once those moments of suffering has ended. So I try to create those experiences in sound and in music, particularly when I'm doing my own composing work, and if it's necessary, then I'll do it for theater as well. These are the states that I try to create, and sometimes that requires the demon to come. But she's not the whole story.
We welcome the demon. JOJO Abbott, do you want to speak a little bit about what you're trying to propagate through the world through your work?
I've been like this crazy person saying power to the God within for a number of years. And I think people who follow my work are pretty tired of having everything titled power to the God within. I think I have the joy of speaking about God in very scientific, curiosity-based ways, and I invite people into spiritual exploration through artistic expression or witnessing art or co-creating art just by being present with whatever madness I create. much like you, I lean into, I guess, what the world would perceive as dissonance. I thrive in chaos in some ways, but the joy of it is finding ease and peace in chaos and actually seeing the patterns in chaos. And that applies to like my sound mixing work or my video editing work, where things just boil down to numbers. Numbers are also illusions. Anyway, but the purpose of the work is to recalibrate, to retune, to invite into imagination, to invite into creative problem solving. And I think the artist can pose the problem or be a mirror of the problem, and at the same time invite, through conscious design, collective solutions, right? So provocation is necessary, and for me, very much provocation is simply an invitation. I think we experience dissonance always, whether it's internal or external. I mean, walking through the city of New York, when we're talking about sound, there's a lot of dissonant sound, and we live in it, we thrive in it, and so we're in that chaos always, and our capacity to go beyond what is perceived as chaos and find a calm clarity within that, I think, is the power of the human spirit, to rise beyond or sit within or circle around that which is immediately defined as dissonance, because actually it's just an invitation and a pathway to discovery, you know?
Definitely. Dissonance on the way to harmony. Yeah.
Key element.
How about everything? How about the two of you? How would you describe what you're, trying to, what message, what sensibilities are you trying to push through your art?
Yeah, I would say, every project is different. I'm trying to zoom out and think about the overall. I mean, in general, a lot of our projects are exploring the idea of freedom. So that's something that runs through the project. So we're exploring limits of freedom, notions of freedom, in a lot of our work. But we do that through sound, and sound helps us think about freedom and how we move through spaces in a really unique way. And so we do that through, resonating spaces, or asking you to think about old songs, or asking you to think about the voice and intimacy. But the through line is freedom, I would say.
I would add to that a lot of times we're working with music in the African American folk tradition, or concepts from Igbo culture, and that when it comes to particularly African American folk music, we think about all of the information that the music has had to hold. So it's, it is entertainment, it is spiritual, it also holds intellectual information, temporal information, geographical information. It holds a lot. It's held a lot because music can do that, but also because that has been the way that we have passed on information about all of those things. And so it's really refined in African American culture. And so a lot of what we're doing in our projects is working with that understanding, and also kind of extending the line from the music to all the implications of the music.
As Keith put it, sound design in theater is about problem solving, Justin, but you still have your voice, your tone, your sensibilities. What do you feel like? How would you describe what you're putting out into the world through your art?
I think my goal is to broaden perspective. If there's music in a particular show or production, like maybe you hear it differently because it's used differently. That song that I grew up hearing my parents play all the time, I'm like, turn that off. I don't want to hear that. I'm a little kid. I want to hear some rap or something fun. Now I'm older and I'm like, oh, that's what that song meant. Oh, that's what that feeling, that's why my parents wanted to hear it so much. I might be here because of that song, Really, and I'll use an example of like sub bass, right? I see some friends out here in the audience, and we all like our sub bass. Some people are repulsed by it. They hear this boom, boom, boom coming down the street, and a story is attached to what that is, right? I want to bring that into the theater to show that maybe who you're assuming that's coming from isn't that. What those frequencies do to us, what they do to our emotion, and what story is in that, you know? And that's just a small example, but it's literally to broaden perspective and to introduce culture and how things are used in culture differently. You know, something is a blessing to one, it's a hugely offensive to another, right? But how can we show the blessing to those that are offended by it, and like just broaden perspective in that way? So often my goal is that in the room.
I appreciate that. And broadening perspective is part of the reason why I didn't want to start talking to you all as Black artists in the world, because I wanted to experience you as artists in the world who happen to be Black or BIPOC, or I don't know how everybody identifies, you know. I wanted to also not change the name of Black Sound Artists Roundtable, because there might be some people here who came here as Black sound artists to see other Black sound artists talk about themselves. But it's a complicated thing, because we don't want to put ourselves in a box as being a Black sound artist, because what does that mean, right? Are we put in a box to be that, or are we broadening a horizon by being that or being labeled as that? And I just want to know from each of you, and I won't call on any of you because I want it to really come from anybody inspired to talk about it, is what does it mean to be a Black sound artist, and how do you identify as that? Do you welcome that label? Do you reject that label? All of those things in regards to our panel here.
I'm just gonna quote Morgan Freeman.
Oh, that's great. Great. I love it. Let's go.
Very appropriate.
He was being interviewed, I think, at Actors Studio or something like that, and the interviewer was like, "So, you played God. What was it like playing a Black God?" He was like, "I didn't play Black. I am Black." Right. That's my answer.
I know, right? Mic drop. Can we drop the mics?
No. Okay. The sound designer is like, exactly. Don't drop the mics.
I think Blackness, and actually take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. Disclaimer in advance. I've been exploring Blackness less as like a pigment, and please, African Americans, don't come and kill me. Because I know what it means and what it represents, right? So, me being African, from Ghana, of my lineage, of my blood, is a privilege. It's a joy. I'm able to lean into it and have it inform everything that I create, everything that I am. In the American context, there are aspects of my work that I could share that wouldn't be identified as Black. There are aspects of my existence that wouldn't be identified as Black. I'm Black by association, I'm Black by pigment. But beyond that, I struggle to really understand what Blackness is in the now, and that leads me to be thrilled about what it could be for each and every one of us. Whiteness has become so expansive. White people have invited everybody into whiteness. And I believe Blackness...
Not everybody.
Yeah, I mean, but they invited white people they wouldn't otherwise invite into whiteness, right? There's power in numbers. And so... I think for us as Black people, understanding that it's a global community, it's very diverse, and we fuse with many other DNA types, and we keep being this evolving space. It's become to me more a space of liberation, of autonomy. And I've had long conversations with myself around, even as Africans seeking independence, when what we truly desire is autonomy and true activation of liberty. And so I will lean into Blackness as an identifying term as far as letting someone else who identifies as Black being able to connect with my work in some way, to see themselves in me, to be inspired, to be in dialogue, to be able to relate in that sense. However, I want to also invite that person into witnessing their Blackness as an infinite space of imagination and liberation. And when people ask me, what is it like being a woman in this industry? I'm like, I don't think with my vagina. In the same way, I don't create music asking my skin, how do you feel about, I'm blessed to have access, but at the same time, it's not the end all be all.
Yeah, I love that. And it makes me think a little bit about the propaganda question, how there's been propaganda about what is Black art. And that feels very limiting. And the things that we're doing, I think, is trying to just push against that and creating a little bit more of an expansive a space. Does anybody else hear that tone playing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I know a bunch of sound artists probably heard it. Somebody probably already knows what key it's in. Holland, can you speak a little bit about how your race or your identity in regards to your race, what speaks to your creative process, or if at all?
Yeah, well, I grew up in a family of, on my mom's side, all Black folks who sing. So that is a major part of why I am who I am today and why I vocalize, why I sing, and we all grew up singing together. So from that, from the inception of my life, being raised by Black women and my cousins and all of us singing and harmonizing together, that has been one of the most foundational things that I use to shape music in my life. And it's from that perspective of having that experience in my life and with my life today that shows up in when I do sound design and when I'm called to collaborate with people and when I write. So for me, I think it's just the foundation of how I even entered the realm of sound.
Our website is Black Sound Art.
Amazing. Is that literally the name of www.blacksoundart? I love it. I love it.
This panel
Carry
discussion
on,
is
though. I
brought
wanna
to
hear
you
more.
by blacksoundart.com.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the tradition that we work in, right? So, my family is African American on my mother's side and Igbo on my father's side, and the tradition we pull from is, not just American, it's not just Nigerian Igbo, it's the diaspora, right? And so it was produced by a lot of things, and, including colonialism, but what we created Blackness. You know what I mean? We created this culture out of this historical problem, and so we're really fascinated by that, and it's a gold mine. So we mine that. So we're particularly interested in that, and so using the language Blackness for us is a way to kind of escape the sort of national imaginary borders, and really look at what we've created across the globe and that the globe uses, right? And sort of to encourage people to think about those sounds in new and different ways.
Yeah, please.
No Morgan Freeman quotes. But just inspired by what I'm hearing. So growing up in Atlanta, I always tell people I didn't have to look in the mirror to see myself. It was everywhere, billboards, TV, everywhere. And so since I've left, I feel like it's important for me, again, attached to perspective, to make sure that all of these lives, all of these different Black folks, African Americans, whatever label is put on it, are individuals. It's not a monolithic group of people, which is the issue I have when you just hear Black. Because what does that mean? If we take what we're given through the media, then that's an easy couple things. You know what I mean? We're not that. We're so much more so. And we're in media, actually. You know what I mean? We're part of that propagation. I think that's the word of use right now. And so I just feel like partially I'm like a cultural watchdog on a lot of projects I'm on. I'm like, I don't know those people. And I know a lot of Black people. A lot of different walks of life, but there's something about the expansiveness of the community that needs to be articulated through our work.
Yeah, and to that end, I think we as the diaspora, I think at large, but definitely African Americans, our progression from fully enslaved to where we are in 2023, when you compare it to other cultures around the world that have been enslaved, like haven't had, specifically when you talk about Black sound art, like Black music is one of the only kinds of music that like literally goes around the globe 3 times, like million times over. And it's been from the blues, jazz, to hip hop, to soul, and it just is welcomed by all communities around the world. And it's kind of fascinating that because of something that has to do with, actually, that's going to go on to another thing because I think I'm already over time. How much time do I have left? I have 5 minutes. And I wanted to really talk about what I was about to say, but I'm going to hold off because I want anybody to ask a question of these brilliant minds before we have to end, because I feel like there's so much more to be said. Hang on for 1 second.
Hi. My question to all of you really is, what is one thing that you wish the artists that you collaborate with, what is one thing that you wish they knew about what you do as sound artists?
If I can quote Morgan Freeman. No.
Yeah, no. You're cut off.
I mean, well, theater is tricky because we're all in it together. Like, there's a lot of work that happens before we show up in the room, but then we present these things in tech, and it's like, I hope that works. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think research. I wish people knew the depths of research that happens so that you are articulating these communities properly.
Yeah, hold on to it. Thank you.
I mean, we're really fortunate in that we choose our collaborators, and so they're people who understand us and they're there to dialogue with us. So, yeah.
Yeah, same for me. It's usually people who are familiar with my work and my values and my purpose, and so there's usually communication beyond words and connection that's beyond words existing.
I love everybody's answers. I think I'm in a place where like collaborators find me, and then I'm like, is yes or no, and then versus just I'm looking forward to being in a place where y'all are at. I think something that I really love is that research part. Everything everybody said, but also sometimes there's an idea that with collaborators that you can just produce, that you can just deliver, especially if you're sort of hired, for a gig or, to do sound for a show. And maybe that research was done, but there's a misunderstanding that you're just supposed to deliver in the moment, perfectly each time. And if you don't, and the energy it takes to really refine something, to make it live in the best way that it can, it takes work. So I think if they somehow have that understanding to want to go through that process in an exciting and compassionate way, in a way with healthy communication and understanding that we aren't machines that can just, make it hit every time. It's like, we will when we premiere, but on day 2 of the, the residency, slow down. So probably something along those lines.
Yeah, thank you all for that. Another question in the back, Queen. Good afternoon. What? You can't sneak in. Let's bask in Queen's glow. What's your question, Queen?
The word black has geographical power. It pulls everyone in. Blacks here, blacks there, blacks wherever they may be. And so my question to the panel is, do you think, obviously, potentially, that does sound have healing properties? And how do you implement that in the work and the design that you do for audiences, for performances, even for the performers on stage? Thank you.
You said, does sound have healing properties? Is that what you said?
Does your sound art have healing properties in it? Which is an amazing question, and speaks to our technology that's built into our DNA. Even though I know you're talking about not asking your skin a question, but I think your skin might be giving you answers that you might not know. But that's just how we are. You know what I mean? But does anybody want to answer that question, please?
I think that's really the exciting part. For me, I really love what my sound can do to the Black DNA. There are certain sounds that people who are of that tree can respond to on a metaphysical and physical level that is profound. Even if the person in this generation, in this body, on a surface level of consciousness says, I don't identify with that sound, on some cellular level or some spiritual level, there is immediate connection. That's beautiful. Because it allows for the potential to create a cocoon of safety, of strength, of love, and pull us back into the womb, straight through to the motherland, to creation, to source. It ushers us into the power of our Blackness, not as a tool that's used to demean us or to oppress us, but literally our solution, our path forward, our force, our decadence, our succulence, right? And so when I'm creating sound and there are Black bodies in the space, I understand that I can tap into that global unifying force, and I can awaken us, connecting our ancestors above our heads and cause them to rejoice and empower, right? And that's super powerful. That's humbling. That takes a lot of research, a lot of presence, understanding sound deep within my body, trusting my intuition, my old mind that precedes the new mind. And yeah, I'm gonna end there because we ain't got time. But thank you for that. That was really powerful. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
I would say my take on it, can sound heal? I would not necessarily make those claims about what I produce, but I think what sound can do when we get it right. I think we can heal ourselves, and sound can allow you, remind you, encourage you to go inside and do what you need to do. And so I think often we're trying to set the stage, we're trying to help you go inside. Yeah, so.
I got a lot to say in that time. I
know. Really quickly, yes. I think sound heals. I think we are vibrating beings. We can get scientific for a second. We are vibrating beings. Sound are vibrating waves entering, so there's an interaction there. So it can both heal and hurt, actually. And I think about the idea of sound baths, right? People go to these sound baths for healing and calm. What bath are we in daily? Walking down Fifth Avenue, Times Square, that's a sound bath too, and understand how that affects you, right? And when you're walking through the quiet part of Central Park, like that's sound. Is it healing? What is it doing for you? So yes, and be aware of what you're bathing in, kind of, recognize that.
I'm gonna grab this for me. I wish I could have more do I have more time? I don't have more time. I've got to wrap up. The orchestra is gonna start playing me off. The orchestra's gonna play me off. Thank you all for coming. I see so many amazing faces. Thank you all. Thank you for joining. Thank you for accepting to be on the panel with me. Before we leave, a couple things. Number one is there's art installations all throughout this building. I don't know where all they are, but I know there's some on this floor. There's some on the second floor. Are there any other floors where these sound installations are on? Jane, I see you. No? Just 1 and 2, okay? The second thing is we're going to start playing a piece from you two that, I don't know which one have you got queued up? Different tones and frequency. Do either one of you want to key up what this is going to be as people exit the space?
Different tones is from a live video and sound performance, and frequency is a public sound installation that's at the Caramore Music Space in Katona, New York.
Amazing. Thank you all. Thank you. Have a good day. Peace.
Wherever one thing stands, something else stands beside it. Wherever one thing stands, something else stands beside it. Wherever spring stands, winter stands beside it. Wherever silence stands, a heartbeat stands beside it. Whenever a spider stands, silk stands beside it. Whenever darkness stands, light stands beside it. Whenever branches, roots.
Mendi Obadike. I'm Keith Obadike. And our piece here is frequency. We have two pieces, timbre and frequency, on different parts of the Kenmore grounds. Frequency takes a starting point from Ralph Ellison's work, his novel, The Invisible Man. So we made this piece because we really wanted to think about the musicality sort of built into the language, embedded in the language from this novel.
Yes. In the novel, the protagonist is talking about speaking for others on a register that not everyone can understand. And it's been taken up, this idea has been taken up in historical studies to talk about untracked politics.